Welcome to the Cver Sports podcast in partnership with The Joy of Football, with me, Neil Barnett.
And me, Martin Tyler.
Join us as we talk to the people who have lived the game, real stories, real insight, and a closer look at the moments that shaped football both on and off the pitch. Hello, The Joy of Football podcast with Martin Tyler, the greatest commentator in the world, and me, Neil Barnett, is in the Munch and Wiggles in Oxshott today, Oxshott's best coffee shop, and is coming to you in a partnership with Cver Sports, the home of digital sport, health, and fitness content that's innovative, inclusive, and properly useful. And we've got the perfect guest for such a health enterprise, because it is Gary Lewin, if we can say, medical legend in football terms.
Beyond legendary status, if there is such a thing.
As a youngster, he became the Arsenal physio in 1986. He became the England physio in 1996, exclusively in 2006?
2008, yeah.
2008, and he was England physio until 2016, after which he did a year at West Ham and is now heavily involved with Arsenal women. I've got to say, I've never met Gary before today. I've loathed him from a distance as a Chelsea man, except when he sort of saved JT from John Terry from not breathing. But you, Martin, have known him for decades.
It's great to see you, mate.
Yeah, and you. Yeah, we go back a long way.
So I tried to score goals past you in the Arsenal gym.
Yeah, I think I was 14 at the time.
Yeah. Well, the commentators team, which was quite a feisty outfit in its day. We played charity game before the Premier League started, way back into the 70s. We were allowed to train, I'm not sure quite how, but we were allowed to train at Highbury on a Thursday night, which was not on the pitch, but we ran around the track around the outside, and it was very useful. I think I'm still feeling the benefits of it today. And sometimes we were called upon to play with the kids, to give them some football as well, which we jumped at the chance. We go up into the Arsenal area where there was an indoor pitch, and then we came across Gary. And what are your memories of that? I mean,
I remember Roger Thompson was the coach,
yeah,
and Terry Burton was the youth team manager at the time. We used to train at Highbury. In those days, it's not like it wasn't academies in those days. Basically, you trained with any club you wanted to until you were 14, and at 14 you signed with that one club. And so I joined Arsenal when I was 12 or 13, and at 14 I signed for them as a schoolboy. And we used to train Monday nights, Thursday nights, from 7 till 8 o'clock on the indoor pitch that you mentioned. And on Thursday nights, I know Roger used to take you training, and I think Ian Crawford was another coach from those days that used to help out
Roger
as well.
Smith.
Roger Smith, yeah. And either you'd come and join in with us, or I used to get the call afterwards and say, Gary, we need a keeper. Can you stay for another hour? So I'd stay behind and join in with these guys, not to know that our roles would sort of come back together again many, many years later when I left playing.
Can you just explain, because Martin always presents himself football-wise as a cart horse who could score a few goals. Is that a description worthy of his commentary status?
I wouldn't use the word cart horse.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would call him an old-fashioned centre forward. The ball moved to him, but when it did, he could put it in the back of the net.
Did I score past you? Can you remember?
Probably. Most people had. And then so we did that. And then what happened then is I went full-time as an apprentice and then a pro. But I started doing my coaching badges. So I carried on training, I'm going to use the word kids, on a Thursday night, even though I was still a kid myself. And so I often then stayed behind and joined you guys to train afterwards as well. So, I mean...
and what happened to your goalkeeping career?
It failed miserably. No, I was released when I was 18. I wasn't good enough. And that's when I had a life-changing decision to make, because I left school with 9 O-levels as they were then, but I had no A-levels. And so I got released by Arsenal. Terry Neal pulled me in the office and told me they weren't going to offer me another contract. And so I got some advice from 2 people that I will thank until the day I die. And that was Alf Fields, who's no longer with us, but he was the kit man at Arsenal. And Fred Street, who is still very much with us, and I still talk to Fred regularly. Alf was the kit man. Fred was the Arsenal first team physio and the England physio of the time.
Yeah.
And he said to me, what do you think about physiotherapy? And at the time, I'd made the decision that I had offers to go down on trial at lower division teams. Excuse me. But I made the decision that I wanted a career. And in those days, you had Ian Wrights, Les Ferdinands, you had Stuart Pearce's coming from non-league football. So I felt if I was good enough, I'd come back in. But I wanted something underneath me as a career. So I didn't know whether to be a police officer, a PE teacher, or Fred took me into the life as a physio. So
was Fred Street was the World Cup physio, wasn't he? For Ramsey?
I'm not sure about Sir Alf. He was Ron Greenwood.
Yeah.
He was Ron Greenwood.
Yeah.
He was famously in Italy with Bobby Robson and Gaza. And so he sent me up to Guy's Hospital, and I had a look around and got the bug for it and thought that's what I was going to do. So I left Arsenal in 82 as an 18-year-old. I had to go back to my old school to do my A-levels. Now, again, this is how old it was, how long ago it was. In those days, if you failed your A-levels, you could stay on and be a third-year sixth former. Yeah. My old school were unbelievable for me. They agreed for me to go back as a third-year sixth former for me to do my A-levels.
So you had to cram them in.
So I crammed them in, and then I played at Barnett, who then were in the Conference League, which is now the National League.
Barry
Fry was the manager, yeah. I was at Dagenham pre-season with Ted Hardy, another character. Yeah. And then Barry came on, offered me a one-year contract at Barnett. So I played at Barnett, was at school.
Which school?
Redden Court School in Harold Wood. And so I did that for a year. And then at the end of that year, I then made the decision to go into physiotherapy, and I was very fortunate to be accepted at Guy's Hospital. A year of 44 students, me and one other guy. So that was another reason to take up physiotherapy. And that's when my life changed again, in that I'd planned to carry on playing for Barnett. Fred Street retired. Another physio called Roy Johnson came on into Arsenal and decided that he didn't want a full-time assistant. Fred had Roy as his full-time assistant. And they asked me if I would like to work with the reserve team and the youth team as a physio. In those days, you didn't have to be a chartered physio as long as you had the FA diploma or first aid certificate.
Was that the treatment of injuries course?
Treatment of injuries course, that's right, which I eventually ended up teaching on. And so what I did is I went to Guy's Hospital Monday to Friday, 9 till 5, trained as a chartered physio. And then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights, I would cover evening training at Highbury on the pitch that we just spoke about. Saturdays and Sundays would be working with the reserve team and the youth team, and did that for 3 years. Had to pack up playing, obviously. That's when I started playing for you guys.
I have to say, sparing Gary's blushes here, he gave one of the greatest displays of goalkeeping I've ever seen in a Derek Hales testimonial game at Welling, where they had George Best, and a few others. I think a young Rob Lee, who was at Charlton then.
It was Rob,
And we got a 5-5 draw, and it sounds as though Gary could have let in 25, to be honest, and he kept it down to 5. And
it took me about 3 weeks to recover from that game.
But I'll never forget that. I mean, all the things we've shared together.
Yeah, that was a good day.
A real day, wasn't it? A proper day.
Derek Howes played.
He did.
Ex-Charlton, yeah. And then, whereas I thought my life had changed in those 3 years, then suddenly it turned again in that George Graham became the manager at Arsenal. Roy Johnson left, and in the September of that year, don't forget, I qualified as a newly chartered physio in the July. My first placement was at Guy's Hospital Intensive Care, and then George offered me the first team job at Arsenal in September '86 at the age of 22.
So, how has medical departments of Premier League football clubs changed between 1986 pre-Premier League, 1986 and 2025?
See, what I would say to that is I wouldn't actually just categorise medical departments. Let me put it into context. When we won the league at Anfield in '89, the full-time staff for the first team men was George Graham, Theo Foley, the kit man Tony Donnelly, and myself. Everyone else was either part of the academy or part-time. Bob Wilson was a goalkeeping coach. He was part-time. Pat Rice was in the youth team. Steve Burnshaw was chief scout. So there was 4 full-time staff.
And that was the same in every club.
That was standard for all clubs. Yeah. And as the physio in those days, I looked after the first team squad, reserve team squad, youth team squad. You mucked in, you drove the kit van, you helped out with the kit, you cleaned the boots. Everyone mucks in. Nowadays, you're probably looking at in the performance team alone of at least 20. And altogether, most teams in the Premier League now travel with 2 coaches. I know it started due to COVID.
2 coaches, right?
Yeah. So, and where they had to separate the players and the staff, but they've kept it on board now because most clubs fill up a coach with their staff. And that's analysts, coaching, sports science, performance, medical, security, comms. It's a significant change.
But you were treating some of us commentators when you were 22 years old.
Yeah.
And we're all grateful, by the way. But what you were able to do then, and what the medical advances of, I mean, the old ultrasound and even hands-on wasn't very much prominent then in terms of soft tissue injuries and things like that. How marked is the progress?
I would say probably the most significant change is diagnostics. In those days, we could X-ray people. You could do an isotope bone scan. Apart from that, you didn't. It was all clinical judgment. Whereas nowadays, you've got MRI scans, CT scans, ultrasound scans. And so the diagnostics now are much, much better. I think the standard of medical staff that support you is greatly improved. And one of the legacies of the Olympics in 2012 is now that we have sports medicine doctors and that are specifically trained in sports medicine, whereas in the past, most club doctors were famously GPs who had a love for the club and might have done a sports diploma.
I would say rest it for 6 weeks rather than rush people back.
Fred Street used to say hot bath, Tatterbrufen and fit for Saturday.
I mean, it's worth saying as well, it's remarkable looking back that the biggest football clubs in this country didn't have a full-time doctor. And a doctor used to drop in once or twice a week.
Yeah, twice a week. Our doctors, we had 3 part-time doctors that did a clinic on a Monday, a clinic on a Thursday, which was quite funny in those days because George Graham was a stickler for discipline and he liked to make life difficult for injured players. So we used to do the clinics at Highbury, even though our training ground was in Hertfordshire. So on a Monday and Thursday, all injured players had to drive back to Highbury for a 2:00 clinic.
That would anger them
and
so much.
Yeah, exactly. And that was George's philosophy.
Don't be injured then.
They won't like being injured. That was his philosophy. Don't make life easy for them. And they're the biggest difference. I think the diagnostics and the medical support. In those days, again, you had a club doctor who was a GP, and you would go and see an orthopaedic surgeon if you wanted opinion. And again, most clubs had one orthopaedic surgeon that covered everything, whether it was your head or your foot. Whereas now you have sports medicine consultants that are normally based at the clubs. You have orthopaedic consultants. You have an ankle specialist, a knee specialist, a hip specialist, a back specialist, shoulder. Every joint or part of your body has its a consultant who specialises in that area, and that's all they do day in and day out.
And how much better is it than it used to be, or is it actually loads of professionals? But hey, the guys who got on with it before get on with it now.
Yeah, I think you can't compare the two because I mean we used to have squads of 18 players, and I think when we won the league in '89, I think we used 15 or 16 players. It was something ridiculous like that. The game has changed so much. They're out and out athletes now. I mean, it used to be a game of attrition where you would play week in and week out, and the only time the player didn't play is when they had an injury, and they did not like it when somebody got injured. That's the only time they used to get dropped. So whereas nowadays it is a squad game, it's very, very tactical compared to how it used to be. And so it's really difficult to change the two. I would say it's different rather than better.
Can we go back to, you mentioned winning the league in 1989 and that day, and that ended with Michael Thomas being the hero. I think the real hero was the person that got Michael Thomas to play in that game, wasn't it?
Just for people who don't know, Michael Thomas did what Sergio Aguero did.
Yeah.
He scored in the last kick of the game in order to win the
yeah,
title. Also had to win 2-0.
Being very biased, I would say it was a bit more than that. We went to the last 3 games of the season. We had Derby at home, Wimbledon at home, both who were fighting relegation, and then Liverpool away. And the reason why we had Liverpool away is because that was the Hillsborough year. So that our game against Liverpool was cancelled because of the cup semi-final, I think it was,
which was
the Hillsborough disaster.
Yeah.
And so, because games were then cancelled after the Hillsborough disaster, we couldn't play it, and so the league decided to play it. I think England were playing Scotland as an international home countries game on that weekend.
And it wasn't the custom and practice to play all the games on the last day of the season. It was often a tail over for postponements and things like that. So
that was a Premier League.
That was a Premier League.
So going into those last 3 games, we needed 4 points to win the league. Lost 2-1 to Derby. I think Dean Saunders scored. We drew 2-2 with Wimbledon, and Nigel Winterburn scored an absolute screamer. I think it was with his right foot as well, in the last minute of the game for us to nick a point, which meant we had to go to Anfield. We were 3 points behind them, and they had a 4-goal difference, better than ours. We had to beat them by 2 goals so that we were same points, same goal difference, and we would have won the league by scoring more goals than them that season. That's why I think it's bigger than Aguero. But I'm biased. Anyway, for the Wimbledon game, Michael injured his middle knee ligament, and it's normally a 3-week job, that sort of injury. We had 10 days to get him right, and I look at it on 2 aspects. With great pride that we managed to get him on the pitch, but also I use it as an illustration, especially to physios, in what do we actually know? Because the day before, my words to George were, he's fit to start, I don't think he'll finish. Any tackle on that knee, it's going to go. He played him, and he ends up scoring the winning goal, the second goal to make it 2-0 in the 92nd minute.
How much was that his physical prowess? How much was that good luck? How much was that attitude?
All 3 of the above. It definitely wasn't the medical side of it. All we did was basically patch him up and threw him out. Now, interestingly, if we'd have had MRI scans in those days, we may not have taken the risk.
Then you might have won 4-0.
That's football.
Yeah,
that's football.
But it must have been. Go through the rest of it. So did you seek him out about the fitness at the end of the game, or were you just so caught up in the
it was a really weird day, because again, in those days, we didn't fly anywhere. So, and we travelled on the day of the game. So we met at Colney in the morning. First thing, Mick, any reaction to yesterday? No, I'm fine. Leave me alone. Okay. Once they say that to you, you don't ask again. That's it. Travelled up. I always used to go to the grounds before and lay the kit out with the kit man. I'd go running around the track before the games. Those were days when I used to be able to run. And then went back to the hotel. It was my job to get the players out of bed. So I did the alarm calls, pre-match meal, go to the game. I never went into a team talk. It's something I've never done in my whole career. I don't personally feel that's my place to be in a team talk. That's coaches. But
there's an awful lot of people who think it's their place to be in team talks in 2025.
Not for me. But one thing that George spoke to us about over lunch, and he was talking to Theo about how he was going to present the team talk, was we started with a back 5, which was unusual for us, and he's going to keep it tight, and then at the right time he's going to change it, and we're going to win 3-0. And 76th minute we were 1-0 up. He changed to a back 4, and we ended up winning it 2-0 with Mickey scoring in the last minute. So it was and then the rest were just chaos, because funny enough, our club doctor come down with Sir Bobby Robson, who our club doctor was the England doctor, and he came down to cover our game because Sir Bobby had a private jet bringing him down to watch the game the night before England played Scotland. So the doc was there and was at the game, and it was just after the game, it was just incredible.
Can we talk about 2 things that, in a sense, haven't changed? The number, and one in particular, which must concern you a lot. ACLs, anterior cruciate ligament ruptures, which still put people out for anything from 9 months to a year. And now in the women's game, there's so much talk about them being so much more prevalent with women than with men. And the other is concussion, which is such a big subject. And has football ever dealt with it properly? Let's start with ACLs. Exactly what are they?
Yeah.
And how are they treated? And how long does it take people to come back? And what's the difference between men and women?
Well, to put that question into context, when I first started in sports medicine, if you ruptured your ACL, your career was finished. You didn't play with them. It was probably in the early 90s, mid 90s that they started operating on them.
In America.
A guy called Stedman started the thing.
Alan
and then
Shearer
the guy,
that's
right. And a guy called Dandy started doing them in the UK at Cambridge. And what I would say is the statistics nowadays with the incident of injury, they're not increasing. So they're not suddenly got an influx of ACLs, particularly in the women's game. But like all sport nowadays, it's what George Graham had to say in front page, back page. If you're on the back page, I'm happy. Do not get on the front page, for obvious reasons. And ACL now is football's in such a position where you're living in the goldfish bowl. Everything gets highlighted. So the actual numbers statistically aren't going up, but they're being reported more freely. And so what they are, so there's 4 ligaments in your knee, one on the medial or the inside of the knee, which in theory is the main thing that when you're kicking the ball, the inside of your foot, that puts load on that. You've got one on the outside of your knee, the lateral ligament, which again, we kicking the outside of the foot or movement side to side. Inside the knee, we say intra-articular. Inside the knee, you've got 2 cruciates. You've got a posterior one and an anterior one. The posterior one does a lot of things, but in general stops the shin bone or the tibia moving backwards in the knee joint. The anterior cruciate stops the shin bone moving forwards. So if you think about when you're running, if you're decelerating, so you're slowing down, the shift of the lower leg goes forward. That's when your cruciate kicks in. So if you rupture it, it means you've got an unstable knee. So your knee will move forwards and backwards. In some sports, you carry on playing and they brace it. In contact sports, it's very difficult to do that. Although, as I said earlier, before they did the reconstructions they do nowadays, players did try to carry on playing with it. I know there's quite a few players that have tried to play and played to a certain level, but in today's game, you just would not survive. So they go in and they use either a tendon graft from your patella tendon, which is your kicking muscle tendon, or one of your hamstring tendons, and they replace the ligament with a tendon graft, stitch it in. That's why it takes 6 to 9 months for you to come back. The other one you mentioned was concussion.
Hang on, just before that, obviously it used to take 18 months to come back at the beginning, and it's dropped and it's dropped and it's dropped. But for people who follow a team regularly, they must see that often when a player comes back, occasionally they come back at the level that they went out on, but often it takes that extra 6 months to get back to the level. And sometimes it can take a hell of a lot longer. And why is that? And how do you cope with it?
The why, and it depends on player to player, is what you've got to remember is that they've come out because of a significant injury they've had surgery on. So the rest of their body deconditions. And often when you come back from a long-term injury, there's a thing called secondary injury syndrome, where you often pick up a second injury, normally a kicking muscle or a hamstring. And so the first thing is they've got to recover from the surgery and the initial injury. Secondly, they've got to recondition their whole body to tolerate professional football. You have to do that in a way that you're gradually increasing their load to tolerate it. So they're 2 physical components. The next thing is the mental component, in that they haven't played football properly for 6 to 9 months. Getting back in there, if you ask any player to get to the level they get to, it doesn't happen on one day. It takes months, even when you're fully fit, to get to the level you need to get to. So although they've got the muscle memory and the body memory of getting to that level, physically it takes time to get back. The timing, the confidence, the aggressive side of the game. And that takes time. Some players do it a lot quicker. Some players take a little bit longer.
Before we go into concussion, so you're actually saying earlier, Gary, that the hardness of the pitches now, which we know that part artificial in the Premier League pitches, and then drainage is fantastic.
Yeah.
So there isn't a correlation between that and ACLs on the rise then?
No. The only, I mean, there was a big call about AstroTurf pitches, and then it was Deso pitches, which is the new partly artificial and the harder sand-based pitches that we've got nowadays. All the research that FIFA and I think UEFA have done quite a bit of research on it. What it says to you, it's the changing of pitches. So if you go from grass to AstroTurf, it's the changing of pitches that slightly increases the incidence of injury. If you're consistently on the same pitches, it doesn't affect the incidence of injury. And most clubs have Deso as their main match pitch, but also they have it at the training ground. So the pitches now are bowling greens compared to...
Do you think the artificial pitches, I think neither of us are big fans of it, and maybe you as well. But do you think on that argument that eventually they will take over? Because everybody, I mean, a lot of the youngsters come into football at the level we're talking about, having played all their football at that point, whereas we played it in school playgrounds, they played it on artificial surfaces. So will they be more conditioned, and will the PFA maybe allow it to come in?
I think that's a very good question, because I hear that you were never the same off asphalt. As you were
I mean,
I scored lots of goals in the playground.
I mean, they're on to 4Gs and 5Gs. I mean, I remember the original pitches at Loftus Road and Kenilworth Road and Oldham. And that you can't really compare them nowadays. No. To answer your question, no, I don't. I think the grass pitches now are at such a level. I mean, you've seen around the World Cups where they've churned them up, relaid them, and they've been perfect. And I just think it's an outdoor sport. I don't think the authorities have got any willingness to change it. Saying that, commercially, you've got to understand at lower levels, grassroots levels. In the women's game, a lot of international games are played on AstroTurf.
There was a World Cup, wasn't there? In Canada, was that on?
A lot of the pitches there were on AstroTurf, I believe. So I think from a
not
commercial
grassroots levels.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so I think
we've been writing 85 episodes for a joke from you, Neil. Nailed it.
They're flowing off him now. So in essence, I don't think it will ever happen. But I think for commercial reasons, there'll be some areas where they will have to allow it to happen.
And there's so much to talk about here. Is it more prevalent with women than it is with men? ACLs?
Yeah, I mean, the statistics tell you that ACLs you're 6 to 8 times more likely to get an ACL rupture as a woman professional footballer, or as a woman footballer, as a male footballer, and they're just statistics you can't ignore. The biggest discussion is why. And that's really why we're trying to get... There's only about 8% of medical research done in women's football. 92% is all based on men's football. And that's something with my women's hat on now that we're trying to change, and we're trying to do more research. And it's definitely needed. But it's one of the biggest problems you've got with it is you're using statistics to compare men's and women's. So you're 6 to 8 times more likely to get it in women's than you are in men's. But you're not comparing the same sport. In men's football, from the age of 9, they're taken into academies and they're put on strength and conditioning programs. Women's football, it's very, very mixed. Some start at 14, but we can't sign them full-time until they're 18.
Really?
So straight away, they've lost all that historic strength and conditioning, training, programming, knowledge.
Could be as simple as that then, you think?
It could be, but it's multifactorial. I think there's a lot more to it.
It's interesting you say that, because Ray Wilkins, late Ray Wilkins, always used to say that he was convinced that the ACLs became more prevalent when the professional clubs started looking after signing up schoolboys. Because before that, you used to play on a Saturday morning in your dad's team, on a Saturday afternoon in your dad's pub team, on a Sunday morning in your own team, and you played 3 games at the weekend, and you came out with stronger legs and stronger knees and stronger bodies than you do
and
now.
the greater command of the English language as well, I think, in the dressing rooms.
Than you do now. I mean, do you think there is some argument in the building up of...
In other words, are the kids too doctored in instead of street football?
Yeah.
We don't get that anymore, do we?
No, but yeah, I'm sort of going to sit on the fence and when I answer this, because in one breath, I think you're right. But in the next breath, as a medical clinician, we talk all the time about young boys and girls playing too much sport and not doing the fundamentals, the S&C, the movement patterns, the functional movement patterns. And no time is given to that. Basically, if you're good at sport, you play every sport, every day of the week. And so when you go into a high level of sport, you may be strong enough, but you are so fatigued that puts you at risk. So it's a sort of a mixed message that I'm giving back here, in that it is part of me doesn't disagree with what you're saying because it's horses for courses, but part of me does because we're not doing specific training to get them strong enough.
You're far too skilled to go along with this, but the argument, if as a coach you tell them they're tired, they will be tired.
Oh, I remember when I first started in football, you did not use the word tiredness. If the coach heard you say they look tired, you would get your ears wrapped, because if you say they're tired, they think they're tired. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on what side you want to come from, the amount of data that we now have and use, we can tell whether a player's tired or not. Now, again, let me throw it back at you guys and say, is an 80% fatigued top player better than 100% non-fatigued that's not quite as good?
Yes.
The coach will always say yes, 100%. But then you say, but if you keep playing that 80% player, you're going to risk injury.
But now you only have to play him for 70% of the time or 60% of the time.
Well, that's what, again, in the modern game now, that's why you see games as games go. Rugby's even more so. As the game goes on now, you see a lot of tactical changes, and you'll hear managers saying, no, we'd planned to take them off in 60 minutes, or we'd planned to take them off in 70 minutes. You've got a GPS data next, and the sports science are looking at it, and they have markers they put down. And so they will say to the manager, from a physical point of view, this player should come off. What the manager's got to decide is, do I take the risk? Some managers do, some managers don't.
Yeah, so final question on this. How far down the line is the research with the women? Is it getting anywhere? Have you come to any conclusions, or have you got any theories?
It's moving forward greatly. A lot of clubs all around the world are now beginning to do research. FIFA and UEFA are doing a lot of work. The European Club Association are doing a lot of work. But it's not only about ACLs. There's a lot of other things out there, concussion being another one which we're going to come on to. And have I got any conclusions? Yeah, the more we think we know, the less we know. It's probably my conclusion. But look, there's lots of variables there. I mean, there's a lot of messages or misinterpretation of the menstrual cycle. The fact is, we don't know for sure yet. We're actually in our second year of a 3-year PhD into the effects of the menstrual cycle on the women players. You've got the anatomy. There's some discussion by some people that the anatomy plays a part. Women have got wider hips and the angles of the knees are slightly different. My personal belief and my strongest belief is the lack of historic strength and conditioning in young female footballers. Even socially, if you walked into any gym, you very rarely see young women, young girls in there doing specific S&C. It's all men pumping iron. And so even culturally and socially, we don't promote it. And I think that will start to change. I mean, the professional game in women's football is still in its infancy. As they develop the academies more, as we educate the players more, I think that will change. But my biggest belief is the lack of S&C from a young age all the way through.
You're listening to the Joy of Football podcast with our wonderful guest, Gary Lewin, the legendary football medical officer. And this is coming to you in partnership with Cver Sports. Should we move on to concussion?
Yes, I think because it happens now that there's an incident in an academy game that I was involved in last week where a concussion was a concussion, and our physios helped the other clubs with the other club, and had been complimented by the protocol that you and your peer group have passed down.
Yeah.
That now that would never have happened.
No.
Even maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So are you pleased with that progress? And although the players probably will still fight to come back on again, they're getting to know now when they have to stop.
There's probably 2 or 3 aspects towards that. Is the first thing I would say is we never knew. I mean, when I first started in sports medicine, you didn't have any of this knowledge about concussion, and so I think it can only be good for the welfare of players and staff to protect the staff that more knowledge is come to light about concussion. The second thing is about the protocols is not only are the staff being trained better, not only are the staff have the procedures in place to deal with it, but the education of the players and the public, because that's the other thing. People have got a general understanding about concussion now that's helping protect players. And I think that can only be good. The more knowledge people have, the better it is to protect the players. And we still don't know. We still are unsure about the long-term effects of concussion. And every year that goes by, we're learning more and learning more. So I think anything they can put in place now to protect players is for the good. And I think we do have to accept that sometimes people may feel it's too much. But the problem is, if you don't do that and you make a mistake, it's people's quality of life that's been affected when they get older. And that's the bit you must never forget.
I was playing for the university in the mid-1960s. I misheaded the ball and felt a bit dizzy at the end. Drove myself to hospital, no medics there.
Yeah.
Went into A&E and waited. And thankfully in the end, it wasn't concussion. But had it been, you say no knowledge, nobody really knowing, certainly myself not knowing what I should be doing and everything.
Yeah. And that's the problem with it. But I think with the education now everywhere, I think it's only good for the welfare of players. And I keep saying it, staff, it protects the staff more. Now, if you've got set protocols in place where you must do that, you must do that, you must do that, it protects you as a medical clinician to make sure that you don't let the emotion of the game, your profession, your team overcome your clinical judgment.
What about now? One of the consequences of this, the players going down, holding their heads, the referees who are in the same position as the staff, really, they have to make instant judgments. And has that improved the game? We saw Arne Slot recently shouting a head injury when the game wasn't stopped. And that's become very much part of, how shall I say, the professionalism of it. And that's probably a not intended consequence of it.
No. Again, it's like any rule that comes in. Every time they bring a new rule out, they try and work out how can we get around it. I mean, the 30-second rule they've brought out now, where the player has to wait 30 seconds. What you see a lot of teams do, they get the ball and they kick it as close to the corner flag as they can because they know it's going to take 15 seconds to take a throw in. So any rule that comes out, coaches will try to find a way.
The goalkeepers go down injured when they're not injured.
Unfortunately.
Because they can't, but that's one of my law changes we're putting through the podcast is make an outfield player go off for them. That might cut it down a bit, I think, if that was the case.
By the way, the reason it takes 15 seconds to take a throw in is you've got to do the throw-in coach's project and fulfill it. You can't just take a quick throw in.
We love the long throw, by the way. Normally football, it's never. People say it's come back. It's never been away.
No, I don't think so either.
Have we absolutely confirmed that concussion can cause dementia?
To answer your question, we haven't absolutely confirmed anything. We're still, the jury's still out. There is a lot of evidence that says there is a close connection, but we can't categorically say. But I go back to what I said earlier. Until we know for sure, we have to be safe, because if you're not safe, you can only be wrong.
What do you do in the women's game with heading? I mean, this came out, obviously we've worked together at non-league teams, and you're supposed to not head the ball for so many sessions or had it only?
Yeah, no,
do you implement?
Yeah. We sit down with the coaching staff and we implement soft headers, hard headers, and we have a certain number per session and a certain number during the week. And when they're doing their planning for the week, they will put set plays in. And we're fortunate at Arsenal Women that we video every training session, so we keep a log of the amount of heading that takes place, and most teams do that now.
And in the case of someone like Raul Jimenez, with his helmet, who had such a particularly bad by the.
Were you there that night?
I was watching it. No, I was watching it. I'd left Arsenal by then, but I was in the stand watching it. And of course, Ryan Mason.
Yeah.
Is that sufficient? Is that sufficient protection?
Again, without knowing what's gone on, what I would say is there's no way on earth he would be allowed to play if they did not believe it was. Because nowadays, the medical input into that sort of thing is monumental.
Are you amazed I was there when you started and how we are now on your journey, which we haven't even talked about England yet, where I thought he'd had a heart attack and almost had a heart attack myself in Sao Paulo in 2014.
Dislocate my ankle.
Yeah, and when taken off, and I don't know why I was thinking it was a heart attack. But it was
my wife did. She got the insurance policy out to check.
Without causing you too much anguish, can you go back and tell that story?
It was so Brazil was a unique World Cup in that they were still painting the stadium when we arrived. And at Sao Paulo, it wasn't Sao Paulo, it was Manaus, because it was up in the rainforest. And they'd laid a pitch, and the pitch was in good condition, but for some reason they'd laid AstroTurf in the dugout area. And there was a small gap between the AstroTurf and the grass. And of course they watered the pitch, which meant they watered the dugout. And Daniel Sturridge equalised. We all jumped up against Italy in the first game. We all jumped up. I slipped and my foot slid forward into the ditch, and so rotated and dislocated. So of course the whole bench are going mad, and I just tugged the doctor's trouser leg and went and said, "Doc, I think I've dislocated my ankle." And of course he looked down. I think Frank Lampard was on the bench. I remember he went white, and the doc was brilliant. The doc. We're trained to realign if you have a dislocation. He put some pressure on my ankle and it just popped straight back into place. And then I got stretchered off, and then unfortunately I'd fractured it in several places, and so I had to fly back to London, get it reconstructed the following day. So
realigning it wasn't going to get you through the rest of the game.
No chance. No. My biggest hope was I'm going to the hospital with one of the England doctors, and we're going for X-rays and scans, and I'm laying there thinking, from a medical perspective, I know what's probably happened. I've probably cracked the fibula. Hopefully, I hadn't affected the tibia, and I get there and he puts the X-ray up, and I fractured the fibula in several places. It's called a comminuted fracture. And I'd fractured the tibia as well. And I leant over to him and went, "Looks like I'm going home, doctor." I knew straight away that I was in trouble. So I was hoping it would be a minor, because sometimes you can dislocate a joint and you might fracture, have a small fracture. And then they put me in a boot and I could work in a boot. I wouldn't be running on, but I could still work. But no, that was me done. I do remember the funniest thing afterwards though was Studge texted me and said, "Thanks a lot. One of my best goals ever for England, and all they're talking about is you dislocating your ankle."
That's the most. What was the best part of being involved with England?
National anthem. I was the England physio. I think I did over 230 odd games for the senior team, and quite a few other games for under 20s and others, and just being that proud to represent your country. And every game when they did the national anthem, the hairs on the back of my head would stand up. And I remember, I still get quite emotional about it now. I remember I was sitting at home and I was watching the game against Uruguay, the next game, leg up in the air in a cast, and they played the national anthem. I was burst into tears.
Wow. I mean, you were physio all the way through the golden generation that didn't achieve, and there's so many people who've had their say on it. But the physios has always been the room where everybody sits and natters and chats and hangs rather than gets changed and goes back to the hotel or whatever. What was the atmosphere like in there?
I've got a bit of a saying. It's a bit like what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas, and I think it's another reason why I've never written a book, because the medical room is I call it the social workers room, because basically everyone just sits in there and talks and puts the world to rights. And some of the things that have gone in there are just hysterical. And that golden era you're talking about, I read all the stuff that comes out now that we didn't do this, we didn't do that. All I would say is they were some of the greatest years of my life, being in the same room with these people, because they were just really good people that wanted to play football and wanted to win. And I will argue till I'm blue in the face with anybody that says they did not have the desire to win. I've been in the dressing room with been knocked out, and it's the low of the low. And I was just really, really lucky to live through such great times, starting with Glenn Hoddle in 98, going all the way through to Roy Hodgson. I started in France, finished in France, 20 years. And they were, and I think they were the best years in football. I'm biased because I lived them. And you were a family. You often hear me use the phrase football family. And I think you've only got to see, Martin, you would have seen it when the punditries come in and they get the guys together that haven't seen each other for ages. They're like family. And that's what it was like when you went on a World Cup or a European Championship, and even at club level, when the Arsenal in the 90s and the Invincibles year. When you get together now, you're a family, and I always talk about a football family. And they are just memories that I'll cherish for the rest of my life because they were just great times.
And to be fair, when you look back at England's exit, probably up until, 2010 was the Frank Lampard, what should have been a goal, which might have well pegged Germany back. Yeah.
Sol Campbell,
2014.
98.
Once you left 2014, it didn't go in the right direction. Or if you go back all through those World Cups, there is a specific reason rather than a failure of a generation, you would say.
Small margins, fine margins. 98, Sol Campbell scoring with the header and they disallowed it, went on to penalties.
And Beck's getting sent off. It was one of the best halves of football I've ever seen until Beck got sent off.
Yeah, Wayne Rooney breaking his foot against Portugal. Yeah. Michael Owen doing his cruise ship. Wazza being sent off. They're fine margins, and Jamie Carragher scoring the penalty and the referee making him take it again because he hadn't blown his whistle. Misses the second penalty. It is fine margins. But
where do you think Thomas Tuchel's actually been in this coffee shop here, Munchen Wiggles in Oxford? He used to live across the road when he was managing Chelsea. Yeah. How do you view it now from your perspective? Sort of one pace back from it now.
I'm now a fan. I want them to win every game. I think it started really well, and it takes time to build up that. I thought Gareth did an incredible job in the team spirit that he built up. It takes time, and I think it's really exciting. I can't wait for next year. And there's going to be blips. There's going to be games. We had the game in the summer when they lost. Was it Senegal? They lost to in the summer. Yeah. And you're going to have blips. But that's all part of the journey to get to the final and win it. And
a lot of talk is about the medical preparation for it because of the climate. Yeah, I was out in Philadelphia for the Club World Cup where it was extremely hot. You've been through that in other countries. How important is that to the whole package?
Oh no, it's really important. I know Steve Kemp, the England physio at the moment, and Doc Williams and Simon Spencer, the other physio, they'll be on that already. I know they've qualified now, but they would have been on that already. They would have been looking at the different sites. They might have even done recce's by now. And what they'll do is they'll look at the pathways to the final. So they will plan that they're winning it. And they will look at the different pathways if they come first or second in the group, where they'll go to next, where they'll be playing, the environment, the setup. That was the irony about Brazil, that when I went into the hospital in Manaus, I'd done the recce there in the summer before. So when I was wheeled in, the consultant came down and he went, I wasn't expecting to meet you again in this position, and because I'd already done the recce for it, and that's what you do. They'll as the coaches do all the football preparation, the medical and performance team will be doing exactly the same to the fine detail.
And just to take it one stage further, you talked a lot about George Graham, who obviously was such a successful manager in the 80s and 90s for Arsenal. You had two long-term managers, because of course he was succeeded by Arsène Wenger. How closely does the head physio, the head medical officer work with the manager?
I think you'll probably get a better answer from the coaches of how they dealt with the medical staff. But from my point of view, it's about communication, and you have to communicate. And if the communication between the manager and the medical team is not good, it will show. They have to trust you, and vice versa, because you're giving them a lot of confidential information. And you have to have a trust between the two of you. And again, like anything, that builds up with time when you start a new manager. I mean, I only had 3 full-time Arsenal managers. I think I had 8 or 9 England managers. So
it's the wrong way around.
Yeah,
isn't it, really?
exactly. But I would, as with everything, and again, it's going to sound a bit cheesy, but there wasn't a manager I didn't get on with. And I enjoyed working with all of them in different ways. They all had their own way of working. And as a medical person, you never changed your clinical ways. But what you did is you might change the way you work slightly to accommodate the manager's beliefs and feelings. And I think that's so important, that you get to know the manager and there's a trust there, which, touch wood, I would like to think over the years I had that.
But surely they put pressure on you at times. We got to have him fit. We got to have him out on the weekend.
Not as much pressure as you get from 60,000 people around the stadium. But yeah, of course they do.
Just a word on Arsène Wenger and what he brought to the English game. I can remember there were a lot of things about, well, we didn't do it this way before. It was new school.
Sorry, there's sirens going on out there. Have you done anything that you haven't told us about?
No, there's never...
Not again.
Yeah, there are sirens out there. I'm just having a look because we can see out.
No.
Nothing. Arsène Wenger and what he brought and the legacy of that. And that, you were talking about Pep Guardiola changing football, but Arsène came before. Would you put him in the same category?
Oh yeah, again, I'm going to be biased because I worked with him for such a long time. But when he came to Arsenal, people often ask what were the biggest changes he made, and the way I answer that is he made the players believe you train the way you play, and you train to play. Where did you come from an era where as long as you performed on the Saturday, what you did during the week really didn't matter? Whereas under Arsène, it was the way you prepared. When you come in the morning getting ready for training, what you ate, how you warmed up, how you trained, how you slept, how you travelled. It was fine detail and everything. But he took the players on the journey. If you think about the English players that he inherited, that you would not dream in a million years would buy into his philosophy, they all got an extra 5-6 years on their careers because of it, and they got it, they understood it. And then, I mean, some of the stuff he brought in those days is just normal now. It's the way everybody works. But at the time, let me put it into context. The year before, we signed Dennis Bergkamp under Bruce Rioch, and I felt that about Dennis, in that you would watch him train, you drop him prepare. It was the Italian model, that I train the way I play, and I train to play.
As a Dutchman, he'd played in Italy.
He'd come from Inter Milan, and every day in training, he was looking for perfection in training. And I don't remember one day he turned up and just went through the motion of training. It was every day to improve. I want to improve. I want to improve. And that's something that Arsène instilled into everybody. And I think that's why he was so successful.
Did that change the medical department, do you think, as well?
No, I remember meeting him because he was in Japan at the time. So we were doing a lot of conference calls, and I would ask a lot of questions on how he wanted the medical team set up, how he would work. He brought a French osteopath over with him, Philippe Boxel, So I spent some time with Philip before Arsène came over just to see how he worked, and that was a good education for me. And no, it was really heavy into nutrition, rehydration, preparing for games. One thing he once said to me is, don't waste time and energy on players that want to be in the medical room. He said, that's my job to get rid of them. So you do what's right for them, you do what's right for the team, and you give them the treatment they need. Going back to the days of George Graham, when it was to make life quite awkward for injured players, he wasn't like that. He felt that your time was important, and don't waste it on people. But if people need treatment, they had treatment.
We've had some great conversations down the years, and most of them off the record.
Yeah.
All of them off the record, I think. But I know one thing, that you've always got a future mind. You've always got a mindset about the future and how things can improve. From where you are now, what would you like to see improve, whether it's in women's football or the game generally?
I'm probably a bit biased towards the women's game at the moment, because I feel that's where we do need a lot of improvement. Football in general at the moment, there's a lot of debate going on about schedules, fixtures, and what can or can't be done. What I would like to see, and again, it definitely is now coming into the game, is player welfare, more care over players' well-being. And I don't only mean the physical well-being. Mental health is a big issue at the moment. For me, we spoke about concussion earlier. I think mental health is bigger than concussion. And again, we're just beginning to learn a lot more about how professional athletes are affected mentally. And we need to get rid of the stigma that the more you pay them, the less it should affect them. They're still human beings. And so I would like to see player welfare move forward. And I think they are. I think all the stakeholders are looking at it. Obviously, they've all got their own interests, but I do generally feel they are looking at it. And I think that's something that will get better, not only in the men's side, but in the women's side as well. Because, as I said earlier on, we're still in our infancy as professional footballers, and we're playing catch up. And so we've got to be very, very careful how we do that.
Can we do some quickies?
Fire away.
Martin and I don't like 5 subs. Too many.
They want to bring more in, don't they?
They give players rests, but for us, it takes it away from being the players' game, makes it the manager's game.
So whether I like it or not, I'm going to sit on the fence on it for the moment, because my answer back to you is, and I mentioned rugby earlier on, it's crept into rugby now, more and more substitutes on the 60 minutes. If we're going to demand what we demand out of our current players, something has to give. So that then means that you have to rotate them. You have to do it during the game. You have to rest them. And the amount of science and data that we are collecting, you can't ignore that data during a game. So you must be able to change the players, which means you need more substitutes to do it. But we mustn't forget the fundamentals of the game is 11 people against 11 people. And I think there's a tipping point. I'm not going to make judgment on where that tipping point is, but I have to give you both sides of the argument. And from a medical perspective, the fact that they've got more subs means that we are protecting the players. And then it comes back to this welfare piece I said earlier. There is a reason behind the number of substitutions.
What happened if we played 55 minutes on the clock, which is what the time the ball's in play?
Yeah.
And we just played 55 minutes on the clock. Would there be such a need for substitutes then?
I would still argue that the answer is yes, because of the number of games. And the other thing is what you've got to remember, and this is another thing that never gets spoken about, is the variations in prep for matches. What I mean by that is, Premier League, you can play Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Champions League, you can play Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Europa League, Conference League, you can play Wednesday, Thursday. You don't know. You could have a team that could go Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday, playing against a team that's gone Friday, Saturday. And that's where the extra substitutes come in place. Or you're going to get managers to change whole teams, and then they get criticised by the fans and not playing their strongest team.
Do you think we'll ever get to roll on, roll off? Which putting the subs players back on again, which can happen in pre-season games.
Yeah, I'm not against it in friendly games and pre-season games. I can't ever see it because I think the logistics of it's a bit like for years we've argued about the medical team running on while the game's going on, as they do in rugby. And I would say I don't think it would work because the rules are completely different, and logistically I don't think it would work. And I don't think the roll-on subs would work. I'd love to see it looked at, but I don't think it would work.
Martin's been complaining to me since it came in about 10-minute stoppage times and 12-minute stoppage times.
Well, I never ever thought it would come in because of TV. I always thought TV would say to the authorities, we can't afford 10 minutes.
The more action, the better. And it's another 10, 15 minutes of action.
So, and again...
I thought it was more for the fans because your last train goes of a midweek game. You've got another 15, 20 minutes on the
What
game.
I would say against that is when you're in a stadium and it's 1-0 and they suddenly put 7 or 8 minutes up, the atmosphere goes through the roof.
People stay to the end, don't they? They really do.
And does it add
if
more...
they're winning.
Yeah. Does it add more excitement? If it's a 5-0 job and they put 10 minutes injury time up, everyone goes, oh.
But it means the players are often playing 100 and plus minutes, 105.
Yeah, the argument back to that is though the injury time is when the game stopped, so they're not running around. I would argue against that. They're still on their feet.
Still on the feet.
Yeah.
Mental pressure's still there.
It's
You can't lose your concentration.
Yeah. And again, with this extra time, it's another reason why they do need the number of substitutes.
Honestly, Neil's right to some extent, but the excitement as a commentator when the game's tight and up goes 10 minutes and you go, rub your hands. And we get so many late goals.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's much higher than
and it's about it's an entertainment business, and I think that outrules the fact that you're playing 100, 110 minutes at a time.
One of the biggest injury lists in the Premier League now is Chelsea, Club World Cup finalists. One of the biggest injury lists in Ligue 1 is Paris Saint-Germain, Club World Cup finalists, or Champions League, those two clubs. What are your feelings about summer tournaments?
What I would say to that is it's subjective what you've just said, because they played in the summer tournament, they've got a lot of injuries, the two are connected. So you can't take that as one is directly related to it. But this is something that I believe in, and particularly in the women's game, this is really prevalent, because the way we schedule the women's game in the summer is not good. It's improving. FIFA and UEFA are making changes, and so for the better. I would argue that in the good old bad old days, we used to play a season, we would deload the players, they would have a mental and physical complete break. Then we would overload them pre-season training, which would set them up for the season. In today's game, they are naturally a lot fitter. They are athletes now, but we don't deload long enough and we don't overload long enough to prep them for the season. And unfortunately, I think the consequence of that will be more injuries. Now, whether that is related to what happened in the summer, I think Chelsea had 13 days off before they started again. But when they started again, because they only had 13 days off, they would have gone straight back into training. So there was no deload, overload, which when you talk to S&C coaches and sports scientists, if you talk to any athlete, you talk to any sport, they talk about deload, complete mental and physical break, overload to get themselves ready for the season.
One little, I suppose, annoyance of mine is the length of the warm-ups. I first saw it, I first noticed it when Gary Megson was the manager of West Bromwich Albion at Highbury. So we're dating it a bit. I said, I've been out there a long time, came out very early. But a local friend of ours, Joel Ward, we talked to him about it and said, we used to run out, do a booth stretches and play. And that was the case with the professional game. And he said, if we didn't do that warm-up, we're so conditioned to do it, we wouldn't be ready to play. And although it looks maybe energetic, it's energetic to a point. But I think there's been a study that says the best way to get ready to play is to go out and warm up and play.
Yeah.
And not have to go back in the dressing room, sit down and do your bits and bobs to get ready to go out and play. What's your view on that?
I wouldn't argue against that at all. One of the biggest bugbears I had, especially when we were at tournaments, was you'd come off the pitch 15 minutes before the kickoff. You'd be back out again 8 minutes before kickoff. National anthem, standing still, 90 degrees heat, wearing a jacket.
Yeah.
Because the promoters are promoting their jackets. So I don't disagree with what you said. I think that gap is long.
And the 15-minute half-time is long.
Yeah.
I saw Crystal Palace, having played in Europe on the Thursday, play really well at Everton on the Sunday at 2:00.
Yeah.
They went in, sat down for 15 minutes, and the second half they were shot.
Yeah.
It was that one extra bit too much.
Yeah. And again, I think that's where, you see clubs now, when they come out, they put the cones out and they do these little runs to try and fire them up again.
Effect when it's just one or two little swerves and you're out on the pitch.
Yeah. Whether that makes a difference or not, that's down to the scientists that will tell you that, if it's good or bad. But I think the biggest way I would answer that is they are athletes now. And if you look at Olympic athletes, they spend a long time prepping for their
We don't actually see it on television because they do these warm-up things behind the scenes.
They do,
They? And long warm-ups for 100 metres, they're still long warm-ups.
Yeah, they do long warm-ups. And the athletes now, and Joel's right in that they do that day to day. So, for example, in the morning, our players will come in, have breakfast, they'll do individual meetings, but then they're doing the individual stuff, and they will do 20 minutes, 25 minutes individual activation, then they'll do 20 minutes team activation. They're doing 40 minutes pre-act before they get on the pitch. Yeah. And that's the way it is now.
Can we just take you to specific moments?
Okay.
Two awful leg injuries at Arsenal, Eduardo and Aaron Ramsdale.
And Ramsey.
Yeah.
Sorry, So I was there for Eduardo. We dealt with that. It was about the second or third minute of the game. Awful tackle. That was a career-threatening injury. And he came back and played. Some people argued he never returned to the level he was at, but he still carried on playing for many years afterwards. That was a difficult day. I wasn't there with Aaron. It was Colin, my cousin, who took over for me at Arsenal, dealt with Aaron. But I then worked with Aaron at the Olympics. So post leg break, I worked with him in 2012.
And he's still playing.
Yes, he's still going. He's doing well. He's doing well. So they were two nasty injuries.
But when you're out on the pitch dealing with something like that, how much pressure is there on you to sort it out and get off the pitch, and how much pressure and how much freedom is there to take the time you need to take?
You just go into autopilot. That's where your training kicks in, and that's when. I remember there was one England game I was sitting on the bench, and I think it was Phil Neville started laughing at me, and I kept looking at him. I said, "What are you laughing at?" He went, "You're in the zone, aren't you?" And I went, "What do you mean?" He went, "The concentration on your face is funny to watch." And that's what it's like when I used to joke with Martin quite a lot in that I used to go home and watch the game because I didn't feel that I'd watched the game because you get so engrossed in your role. And that's what it's like when you go on a pitch. You have your training, you have your protocols that you stick to, you're on a radio, and that's what you do. And so it's the same as if it's a broken leg, it's an unconscious player, it's a head injury, you just go in, get in the zone, and that's what you do. It's when you reflect on it afterwards, that's when it hits you. Oh God, did I do that right? Did I do that? And then you realise you're in a goldfish bowl when you keep seeing it flashed up on the telly. You think, oh my God, yeah, I think I did that right.
Two head injuries, David Rocastle and John Terry, not with England, but in a cup final. When you were Arsenal.
Yeah, JT's was an interesting one because obviously I'd been working with England and we were playing Chelsea in the League Cup final, and I'd gone on to treat Manuel Almunia. Something had been thrown at him, and so I was called on to treat Manu. And again, just from experience, if you treat a goalkeeper, I would always sit behind the goal until they'd done something significant, either caught the ball, kicked the ball, made a save, whatever. Because early in my career, when I was doing the reserves, I remember going on to a goalkeeper. It was Rhys Wilmot, Welsh goalkeeper, in the reserve team game at Highbury. I ran onto him and got him up, got him moving. I ran straight back to the bench. And as I'm running back to the bench, he lay down again because he wasn't right. And so by doing something wrong, you learn that in future you don't. So I sat behind the goal. Of course, the cross comes in. Abu Diaby volleyed the bottom of John's face, his jaw, and you don't even think about it. You just run straight on, and his eyes had rolled, and his tongue had blocked his air pipe, and so I just put him in a position and did a thing called a jaw thrust, which moved the jaw forward, relaxes the tongue, cleared his airway, and he came round. So it was just being in the right place at the right time. And David Rocastle was over at Millwall. Exactly the same thing happened. Just put him in the right position, did a jaw thrust, the tongue relaxed, and it opened up the airway. But Millwall, the old cold blow lane on a Wednesday night, is not the best place to be. So
and Leo Williamson, England legend, ACL.
Yeah, we went through a phase at Arsenal. We had 5 in a year. So they're like London buses. You don't see them for years, and then they come all at once. And so we lost Leah Bethmead, Vivian Medema, Laura Weinrother was another one. Who was the 5th one? I can't remember. Taya Goldie was our 5th ACL in about 8 months. That does tend to happen. You pick up, I remember the famous metatarsal fractures with Beck started in the 2000s, and then
nobody knew the word.
Nobody knew what they were, and then suddenly there was just like an influx.
You were looking around saying, "Where's my metatarsal?"
Yeah, and it happens, but it goes with the territory, and I think that's again one of the most satisfying parts of the job, that you get people back. You love doing it. They appreciate you doing it. But in the outside world, you don't exist, basically. You just get on with the job.
Do you give yourself a moment to look back? You're going to drive around the M25 now, so I suggest maybe you should do it. To think that I first met as a 14-year-old trying to stop me scoring in the Arsenal a private pitch up Highbury, and what you've achieved and what's happened to you. I mean, they say when you're having fun, it goes quickly. It seems to have gone very quickly, hasn't it? But Gary, you must be very proud. I don't want to put words, I know what a modest guy you are, but what you've achieved from somebody who was offered physiotherapy really as a possible way of not being a footballer. And then you've come to the top of the tree. I
come from East Ham in the East End of London. I didn't make it as a footballer. And I've just said, I get quite emotional because I've had the best time of my life. Yeah. And it's been brilliant, but getting old now, mate. So I'm at the end of it, but it's, I just love every minute of it. I wouldn't swap it for the world.
And how much did you have to change when it came to treating women?
Well, that was interesting because that sort of evolved, because when I went to the FA in 2008 full time, part of my role was to look after all the physios of all the teams. And so I spent some time with England women's team. It was Hope Powell, the manager at the time. And you do have to change. It is a different way of treating people. Obviously, safeguarding is massive. An older man in a female world, you have to be very, very wary of how you work and what you do. But even the working with them, a different anatomy, a different mental aspect towards the game. I keep saying it. They've only been professional for about 5 to 10 years now, so they're in the infancy of the sport. They're learning to be professionals. One of the biggest things, and this comes down to the mental health side of it, they've been thrust into this spotlight after winning the Euros twice that they're not used to. Front page, back page. Yeah. A lot of the women now are front page headlines, and that takes some getting used to. But what I say about all the people I've treated over the years, and I've treated some incredible people in football and other sports, they're people. They're human people, for human beings first. And if you treat them like that, you'll get it right. If you treat them as sports people, that's all about the sport, you'll make mistakes. You've got to treat them as people first.
I can tell everybody, you've always got it right, mate. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
A real pleasure to talk to you, mate.
Gary Lewin, and this has been brought to you in connection with Cver Sports, the home of digital sport, health and fitness content that's innovative, inclusive, and properly useful. From Martin and me.
Cheers.
Ta-ra. ta-ra, but not goodbye, because as we said at the beginning, there's still Martin Tyler's letter from the gantry.
Letter from the gantry.
Cheers, Neil. Thanks as always. Much in the news recently have been Sheffield Wednesday, a club which holds special memories for me. The Owls won the very first match of my commentary career by the first goal I ever broadcast. December the 28th, 1974, 1-0 at Southampton's old ground, the Dell. The match-winning moment came very early, still a test in any fixture before you have the chance to settle into the rhythm of the game and the broadcast. And I hadn't been able to see Wednesday play either, but I had been generously invited to watch a light training session on a local park on the very morning of my gantry debut. I remain ever grateful that the scorer was the very recognisable red-headed Eric Potts. I mention it today because of a similarity to Wednesday's current plight. Now, as then, they find themselves at the wrong end of the second tier of English football. This time, it's ownership issues and administration. Back then, it was on-the-pitch failure. After that victory at the Dell, Sheffield Wednesday had 17 league games left. They won none of them. They lost 14 and drew 3. In those 17 fixtures, they scored just 2 goals. They finished rock bottom of the table. In the era of 2 points for a win, they ended up 14 points from safety. So older Hillsborough fans might well be pointing out to younger generations that the club has had these major struggles before, and that 9 years after that drop into Division 3, they were back in the old First Division. Great managerial work by World Cup winner Jack Charlton, and after him a true son of Sheffield, Howard Wilkinson. They followed a Wembley League Cup triumph in 1991, and a founder membership of the Premier League a year later, which lasted 8 seasons. The good times can come back around just at the darker periods. In those Premier League years, I commentated on a number of Wednesday matches, but none stranger than on January the 21st, 1995. Its events will not leap off the page if you go a browsing. Sheffield Wednesday versus Newcastle United. However, for me, it was very dramatic because it was not my actual assignment for that day. That was Spurs against Manchester City from White Hart Lane. Not for UK transmission, but for pretty much everywhere else, certainly in the English-speaking world. So I was in North London, where rain had started to fall heavily, but there seemed to be no great cause for concern. Manchester City duly arrived. Pitch drainage systems were not what they are today, but it was still a shock when the match officials called the game off. I remember the dismay of that great character of a goalkeeper, John Burridge, who numbered City at the high end of the 18 English clubs he represented. Budgie was down to play that day because of injuries to both regulars Tony Coton and Andy Dibble. At 43 years old, he would have chalked up another Premier League appearance. He knew he wouldn't be in the frame when the fixture was rearranged. And I was on the verge of heading for home when my television bosses pointed out that the game at Hillsborough was being covered but had no commentator at the ground. The Premier League had contracts to fulfill. The days when every game was fully staffed by broadcasters were still far into the future. So I climbed up to the Tottenham gantry with an empty stadium all around me and put on the headphones to hear the roars from a packed Hillsborough. I would see the action being from South Yorkshire on a relatively small television monitor. So unlike John Burridge, I would have a game on that sodden Saturday afternoon, which was great, but no notes, no lineups, and by now it was 2:15 for a 2:55 on air and a 3 p.m. kickoff. So I took a punt and rang Sheffield Wednesday, just the main switchboard. Amazingly, what was in effect a cry for help was answered. So I asked for Richie Barker, a great football man who at the time was the right-hand man to another good friend, the boss, Cver Francis. There was a phone extension in Trevor's office, and incredibly, looking back at the day, Richie picked up 40 minutes before kickoff now, and after chuckling at my situation, he told me the Owls team, what the game plan was, and for good measure threw in the Newcastle lineup as well. Talk about a friend in need. Calling the game from a television screen is known as off-tubing. In the 20 years on from that debut at the Dell, I had accumulated a fair bit of experience of off-tube commentary, but almost always in a television building, a proper sound dubbing suite. I was later to commentate on an Aston Villa FA Cup tie from the back of a van in the car park at Dagenham and Redbridge, but that's another story. After a deep breath and the words, "Cue Martin," in my ears, I was off. As long as you hear the proper sound from the game, it isn't quite as difficult as you might think. And there was bags of noise. Wednesday we're playing Kevin Keegan's entertainers after all, and stacks of instantly recognisable players, with Chris Waddle, once of Newcastle of course, lining up against some old mates, including Peter Beardsley. But for all the attacking talent on the pitch, it finished goalless. My abiding memory when I put down my microphone at the end was the contrast from the roars that had been in my ears via the headphones for a couple of hours to the total peacefulness inside the stadium where I was sitting. There is an old Michael Caine movie, it might be the Ipcress File, wherein the character of Agent Harry Palmer, he thinks he's being incarcerated in an Eastern European country, but manages to escape by moving silently away from his captors. When he opens his door to freedom, he actually finds himself in a very busy, noisy London street. It was just the same for me that afternoon as I made my escape from the silence of the stadium into a packed Tottenham high road.
I've got to say that Sheffield Wednesday team of the 80s and early 90s, I used to make an 11 with my mates of non-world class players who are always world class against Chelsea. And an absolute cast iron member was Carlton Palmer. He absolutely...
He wasn't related to Harry Palmer, though.
No. But he dominated for years against Chelsea in the midfield. Well. And of course, when they won the League Cup, they beat Chelsea in the semi-final. Yeah. What a pair of awful games that was for me. But they were a good team. It was Ron Atkinson was their manager. They beat Manchester United in the final, but they were second tier, the second division at the time.
I must say, I have a personal interest in them doing well now. Jamal Lowe is the best player I've ever coached, been involved in coaching. We had a year at the club called Hampton and Richmond. He's almost 10 years on now. He's earning a lot more money than he was with us playing Sheffield Wednesday, and now he'll get paid. So I'm very pleased for him, and I hope he's part of the movement forward. I know the Wednesday fans, they really care about their club, and in a strange situation.
Big club.
It is a massive club, and in this so-called dark days of administration, actually the light is starting to shine again. So we wish them well from the joy of football. They deserve some joy.
So that's it. It really is it this time on the podcast. Thank you for watching, listening to it all. Don't forget, you can subscribe, you can go to the Patreon, you can read our writings on substack.com, and you can come back next week.
See you next time.